There is a very important topic that we need to cover now, and that is the topic of NATO. We can say a lot about why Ukraine needs to join NATO, why Ukraine needs NATO, and why NATO needs Ukraine. And to start this topic, we have our lovely speakers here, Anya.
Hi, thank you very much. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Захисникам України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Dear friends, I have two important messages today. Number one, as you can see, we have some lovely ladies from Women Fight for Ukraine at the front, holding the Ukraine NATO 33rd Ukraine in NATO, welcome in NATO. For some British people, for some international people, Ukrainian membership in NATO might be a controversial subject. However, Ukrainians are pledging NATO to take Ukraine on board as a member, to prevent any more death, to prevent the war. In fact, Ukrainians have been asking to become members of NATO since before 2014. If that happened, this war could have been prevented. Ukraine should have been made a member of NATO years ago. However, we're still hopeful and we're still asking NATO to invite Ukraine to join it. On 11th and 12th of July, there is going to be an annual summit of NATO in Vilnius, in Lithuania. Ukrainians all over the world are doing this initiative of asking NATO to consider Ukraine once again to take Ukraine on board. Some people might say that if Ukraine joins NATO, this could provoke Russia more. How many more provocations do we need? Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia says that's because there are NATO bases nearby. Finland was invited to join NATO. Did Russia attack Finland? It did not, but Russia is still continuing to making threats against NATO members, against the UK. Russian propaganda channels are still saying that they're going to attack the UK anyway because the UK supports Ukraine. They're threatening Poland, one of Ukraine's biggest allies. They're threatening other members of NATO. So Ukrainians' membership in NATO will not make a difference to Russia. Russia is still going to continue attacking Ukraine. However, NATO can prevent any more war because they can provide Ukraine with arms. They can provide us with military that we need to defend ourselves. I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that sovereign Ukraine, independent Ukraine, has never initiated a single war. Ukraine has been constantly defending itself against its bloody, crazy neighbor, Russia. Ukraine is in the defense and Ukraine is simply asking for protection. And this is what NATO is there for. This is why this organization exists. It exists to protect peace. This is its main purpose. And Ukraine, being a peaceful country that is being brutally attacked by Russia since 2014, by the same Russia that attacked Georgia unprovoked, that attacked Moldova unprovoked, that keeps attacking other countries, Syria, Ukraine. How many more countries does Russia need to attack? Ukraine is now asking that NATO considers it as a member. And I'm asking all of you to say, Ukraine in NATO!
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 Arm Ukraine as you promised!
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 I'm reminding once again something that Pavlo mentioned earlier today, is that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons as due to Budapest Memorandum. The guarantors, such as the United Kingdom, promised that no country will ever attack Ukraine. They promised us our sovereignty. They promised us our territorial integrity. What do we have now? We have Crimea illegally annexed in 2014. We have the war in the east going on since 2014. We have thousands of prisoners of war. We have genocide. We have children who are being illegally deported to Russia, tortured. There is evidence of torture of children. This could be prevented if Ukraine is given weapons to defend itself. You could prevent torture of children. You could prevent deportation of women. You could prevent countless of deaths just by taking Ukraine on NATO. So we're saying once again, Ukraine in NATO!
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 This is going to be, that's why the signs say NATO 33rd, because this is going to be the 33rd Forum of NATO. And interestingly enough, it's going to be almost 33 years since Ukraine's independence. So now is the time, NATO, now is the time to take on Ukraine. And if protecting peace and protecting innocent people is not a good reason enough, then NATO should consider Ukraine, because Ukraine is unfortunately the only country in Europe that has the strongest army. Because Ukrainians have been forced to protect themselves since 2014. Our soldiers are currently the best, the highest quality soldiers in the entire world. All they need is arms. All they need is basic ammunition. All they need is helmets, bulletproof vests, some arms, and they will do the rest. They are protecting peace in the entire Europe with their lives. The least the world can do is help them out. Arm Ukraine now!
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 And another important message that I wanted to make today is about the prisoners of war. I'm sure many of you have seen that yesterday, funnily enough, as a birthday present for our Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny, the Azov soldiers, the Azov commanders returned back to Ukraine. This was a big surprise for everybody. This was a big present, I'm sure, for our Commander-in-Chief and for all of those who prayed for those heroes and who waited them to be home. However, the commander of Azov, he said it himself, we still have around 2,000 prisoners of war just from Azovstal steel plant who are being kept in captivity. The images of those who are being released are horrific. They're being starved, they're being tortured, they're being subject to all kinds of mistreatment against all international laws. So despite the fact that we have some positive news and we have our heroes who are coming home, we need to continue fighting for those who are still in captivity. We need to make sure that every single one of Ukrainian heroes returns home. In fact, from Azovstal steel plant, there are still women who were cooks and who were medics who are being kept illegally in Russian jails. This violates all the laws of war, because civilians, and especially women who were just working as cooks, should not be prosecuted and should not be kept in Russian captivity. So we're asking, release the prisoners of war!
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 And one last message that we always say, world, wake up. We always say, world, support Ukraine. We're always asking for the world to continue supporting us. And of course, we're grateful, especially to the United Kingdom, to Poland, to United States for their continuous support, for providing us with arms, for providing us with humanitarian aid. Of course, we're grateful, but we need more. And we always say, world, wake up, just because the world is unfortunately not doing enough. It's providing us with aid, but we still have deaths every day. We still have Russian missiles flying in central Kiev, even in Lviv earlier this week. We still need air defense. So we're still asking the world to continue supporting us and to provide us with more air defense so that we can at least protect the civilians and our infrastructure. Air defense for Ukraine!
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 Air defense for Ukraine.
And I'm just asking, just to continue with this initiative, until 11th and 12th of July, we have time to draw the media's attention and to draw NATO's attention to the fact that Ukrainian people, being democratic, being independent people who want their voices to be heard, we're asking NATO to consider Ukraine. We want to pledge, we want to pass our message, and we want to be heard. So I'm asking everybody to continue spreading the images of Ukrainian girls, for example, holding the flag of NATO and the posters pledging for NATO to take Ukraine on board. I'm asking you to use hashtag #UkraineNato33rd and to spread the message and to let NATO and the world know that Ukraine needs to join as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!